Hello, everyone. Excited to have my guest here today, who is a brand builder for 7, 8, and even 9-figure industry thought leaders. In addition, she also coaches and mentors thousands of emerging entrepreneurs, helps out course creators just like you, and through her Experience Product Masterclass, helps people create, launch, and deliver experience products and courses. Really excited to welcome today Marisa Murgatroyd. If you want to learn a little bit more about her and the things she's up to, and also some special offers, which we'll talk about later just for you for watching, check out experienceproducts.com/Thinkific. Welcome, Marisa. Great to have you and looking forward to chatting. Just for everyone here, the things we're going to be talking about today is really around student success, completion, gamification, goal setting, and really focusing on getting results for your students. And that's something that Marisa has a lot of expertise in. And so we wanted to bring her in to share with you some of the great knowledge and experience she has in helping thousands of people to create results for their students. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's really good to be here. This is one of the things I love talking about because so many people talk about marketing, but not a lot of people really focus on what happens once people say yes, what happens once people buy, how do you actually support them in realizing everything that you've promised? Because when you can do that, when you deliver on your promises in a way that people get excited about, they're going to become customers for life. Your business will transform, but you'll also feel so much better about selling and marketing what you do.
Agreed. Yeah. And we see that is that where people have statistically, when people get good course completion rates and more than that, the students actually get some results out of the programs they're taking is it drives the whole business around the courses in that people come back, they refer their friends, they leave great testimonials, they come back, they repeat work with you or repurchase. So really excited to dive into this stuff. Plus, I really do think this is probably the number one problem plaguing online education or just education as a whole is getting over that motivation hump and completion and getting results for students. And really a lot of wonderful things happen when you do that. So I think one of the things that you're well known for that we may as well just dive into because I think it's fun and exciting for our audience especially is gamification. And you do some really cool things and you've shared a little bit of it with me. You do some really cool things around gamification. So maybe if you want to share how that's working, some of the cool things that you're doing, how people can incorporate that into some of the programs they're doing. And maybe even starting off with just a bit of how you see gamification, because I know some people hear gamification and they think Mario Brothers and, video games, but I know that's not exactly how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of how I see gamification and why apply it to this whole world of online trainings and courses and programs and information-based product. Well, first of all, if you just look at the industry of self-paced learning versus the industry of games and apps, is self-paced learning has been down for 3 years in a row. And this past year, it dropped 7%. Meanwhile, games and apps is exploding. It's grown 270% in the last year alone, the game and app industry. So clearly one industry is in decline and another is on the rise. And I think the reason is that right now, we live in the world where all of human knowledge is at our fingertips, one Google search away. So there's so much information, and trying to give more people more information, it's kind of like giving a drowning man a glass of water, right? Trying to save their life with a glass of water. It just does not work. And so you've got to kind of look at the trends in a world where there's so much information, where people are saturated with information. This promise of more information doesn't work because information alone doesn't work to transform people's lives. If it did, we'd be living in Googletopia. But instead, what's happened is it's been more of a Google apocalypse where there's more frustration, there's more depression, there are more problems in the world, and information just isn't solving those problems. So when I look at gamification and why that industry is booming, it's not just because of escapism. It's not just because we're trying to get people to do silly things. But used right, gamification is about working with human motivation and understanding our own psychological triggers and how we tick. So what gamification can do, and gamification is applying the principles that emerge in games to real world situation outside of games, is it can close a gap between what people have to do and what they want to do. So when you can actually close the gap between what people have to do and what they want to do, you can actually set them up to win at the game of life. And you can make big challenges, whether it's finding a relationship, organizing your finances, making your first 6 figures in business, whatever it happens to be, changing the way that you eat, making that so much more inspirational and a lot less obligatory. So we're actually motivated and inspired every single day to do the work, to take massive action, to get huge results, and to ultimately change our lives and then want to buy from you over and over again.
That's interesting about the decline. And so where do you see that on the decline side? Because we must be, if the industry is, we must be doing something right. Because I'm seeing on our end, it's more and more course creators, more and more courses, and an actual increase in some of the things they're doing. So maybe it is that we do have some gamification built in and that element is working. Or is that the overall sort of info product industry that you see moving down?
Yeah. So these numbers are for the overall info product industry. Now, that doesn't mean that there are less people creating products, because what you'll notice is that platforms like Coursera and all of these platforms, more and more people are coming in with the promise of this leveraged income source and wanting to reach masses of people with their knowledge and expertise. But in terms of overall sales are declining every single year, right?
That's and I think that maybe that goes to the student results side. We've always had a really big focus on student results, which is why I love having this chat with you, because it's super important for us. We've actually been seeing our overall GMV or overall gross sales through the platform usually tripling year over year. So it's really, and even on an individual cohort, like people who joined in 2015 are selling more in 2017 than they are in 2015, and so on across cohorts. But I think that comes back to the fact that a lot of the older technologies or older ways of thinking about things are really not capturing some of the stuff that you and we are building into how we're delivering these things. So actually, one thing I saw that sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say along those lines that the industry average of people who purchase this kind of product and actually complete it and get results is 3%. Right. So an average of just 3% of people who buy these kinds of products actually complete them and get results. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person who's creating a course or training is leaving all their people behind, but a lot of people who are using more traditional methodologies to create programs and courses are actually not doing a massive service for their clients. But that doesn't mean it has to be that way, because personally, our business grew 50% last year, and we primarily sell courses and training. So what I see here is actually a huge opportunity when you learn what we're talking about in this conversation, that you can stand out from people who are not doing this stuff and actually position yourself as someone who's on the cutting edge of online learning and online training, and get people super inspired to take action and hooked on working with you. So there's an opportunity here.
Definitely. And I've seen that in my own personal course. I have a little bit of just a tiny amount of gamification, and I get, because of it, and since we've rolled it out, we get way better completion rates, way better students achieving their goals that they set out to. And that means that for, at least for my course, the primary driver of new customers for us is actually referrals and testimonials and new people coming in. One thing, so in terms of like the specifics of gamification, and I know you mentioned the gaming industry, but I know we don't build in like actual video games into our learning products. Well, some people do. We haven't been doing that. I don't think that's not something you're doing, of actually putting games in. It's more about building in surprise and incentive, right?
Well, there's actually 10 core principles in the experience formula that I talk about. Yeah. And I would say 9 of them come from games. Yeah. Or at least 9 of them are used in games, not that they come from games, because they're really universal principles of understanding what motivates humans to learn, understanding curriculum design, understanding adult learning habits. So a lot of them are shared in games, but also shared in other places. So 9 of them you can find in games, and 1 of them you cannot.
Okay, so what's one of those things? I mean, for us, one thing I look at is actually creating a reward that is somewhat unpredictable. Like in a video game, you kill an enemy and they drop some reward for you. Maybe it's coins or a magical item, but you never really know what that's going to get. And that's one of those things that unknown, it's almost gambling, to be honest, that gets you going forward. But what's one thing that you're incorporating on that list of 9 of things that you're incorporating in learning?
Sure. Well, one of them, the first principle, is super important, and it's the principle of mission. Mm-hmm. So the principle of mission is people know exactly what it's going to take for them to win the game. Basically, what are they going to do through the game? What are they going to do through your program? Now, that sounds obvious, but most programs and courses tend to be an education focused and not an outcome or result focused. So we help people get hyper clear on what the mission of their product is, because if people don't understand what winning looks like, then they can't win the game. And that's incredibly demotivating. So for example, I created a template for defining your product mission. And I kind of swiped it from the Mission Impossible movie series, but I call it the Mission possible template. So it says this: your mission, should you choose to accept it, is blank. And when you phrase your mission in that way, it's not about what you want to give through your product, but it's what people are going to do, be, feel, have, overcome, or achieve. So for example, for our Experience Product Masterclass, it's your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to design, market, and make $2,000 or a whole lot more from an experience product in 10 weeks or less. So instantly, you know exactly what you're going to do, you know exactly how long it's going to take, and you know why it matters. So a good mission statement is binary in the sense that and you've either achieved it or you haven't. It's a yes or no, black or white, on or off state, which is very much aligned with games. So, for example, if you look at the mission of Candy Crush, it's not world changing, but it's basically line up 3 pieces of candy, right? And then the whole row drops down. It's very clear exactly what you need to do. But when people don't have that clarity, they kind of go around in circles and they're not really sure what they should be doing, what they're working on, what the actual goal is, and how it's going to impact their life in a very real way.
So then do you check in with them later on that mission? Is there a point where you touch base on the mission? I mean, I love having that clarity. And I think a lot of people could learn from that even. Well, 2 things. Do you check in later? And also, do you use that in the marketing language? To me, that's super impactful even in the marketing, because I'm like, oh, now I know why I'm signing up for your program.
So the really interesting thing is a lot of these principles can be applied to both marketing and delivery of your program. So in the marketing, simply having a good mission where people know exactly what they're going to get and what that means for them is super important. And so many programs just teach, say, competence or skill building or performance enhancement, but there's no measurable goal. And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And people also don't know whether they're on track. But then that becomes the entire organizing principle for the whole program. When you have the right mission, then the only thing that you want to include in your program is anything that's going to help someone get from mission to mission accomplished. Anything else you just get rid of, which actually makes the product creation easier, because what happens as experts is we feel a need to make this comprehensive omnibus product that promises the sun, the moon, and the stars and gives the world, right? And then people get overwhelmed because they don't need to know everything about your topic. They just need to know what's going to get them what they want to do, which is the result of the mission of the product. So it becomes the organizing principle. So for example, we have, as soon as people log on, it says, okay, mission starts in, and when the mission starts in, there's a countdown timer, and then it says mission completes in, and there's a countdown timer. And so they know, how much longer they have to complete the mission, and we're constantly reinforcing it throughout the program. It's not just something we give them once at the beginning, but we're constantly saying where they are in relationship to mission accomplished. So here's accomplished over here. This is the start point. And then there's all these different interim points, because one of the other principles is unstoppable momentum. So unstoppable momentum is actually ramping people up from small, simple actions and wins to larger and larger actions and wins. So you're structuring the design of the program to allow people to build momentum. For example, a game increases the challenge level 25% each level, because people love to be challenged and they aspire towards more. But if they're so challenged, like they're dropped in the deep end of the pool, they start to get unmotivated and they give up. One of the other things that game shows that if someone's on an interface for longer than 4 seconds, doesn't know exactly what to do, they start to feel stupid and they emotionally disconnect. So if you have those moments where people are spending a long time trying to figure out what to do, they emotionally disconnect from the process. So this idea of unstoppable momentum is based on how you actually structure your program to create wins along the way, but to ramp those wins up all the way from this saying yes to the mission to actually achieving the outcome and removing the friction points along the way.
And for everyone watching, if you're interested in pursuing that mission, which I know lots of you are, I mentioned it earlier, but experienceproducts.com/Thinkific, and you can learn more about that mission and how you can accomplish that with Marisa. So another interesting one that I mentioned is surprise. And I know you have a few little surprise elements. I don't want you to give away all the surprises because that's for people to experience. But is there something in share around how you build in sort of that surprise and delight element in there?
Yeah.
You have some really cool, almost special effects type things that are occurring along the way. But how do you kind of look at building in those elements of rewards and surprise throughout the program?
For sure. So experience number 6 in our experience formula is what I call peak emotional experiences. So essentially what games are really good at is dropping people into situations and kind of doing these surprise rewards and just kind of changing the game as you go through it. So peak emotional experiences, and peak experiences are something that people have a lot of times in the discovery process. So if you can make learning a discovery process and you can use things like storytelling, multisensory language, like really immersing people in the five senses, things like surprise and delight, and really understanding that you're teaching to a whole human being and not just to their brain. So much education based on the kind of lecture style that we learned and many of us experienced in school is just teaching to a small part of humans. But when you drop them into a world where there's stories, there's emotion, there's the five senses, there's surprise, there are things that are happening, you're just engaging more of the human. Because people don't actually learn just through books and just through information. Like so many of us as children, we learned by having real world experiences, like trying things and failing. And that's kind of what really happens. So getting people involved in the implementation very quickly, and not just the thinking in the mental processing, but the actual implementation is a huge part of it. And then kind of creating experiences where they're not just learning something. So let me give you an example of this. And this was something I actually did at a live event, but you can do things in your programs and your online trainings as well. So I wanted to teach people this idea of a marketing offer, creating like a irresistible offer that people want to say yes to. And I wanted to show the difference between all of the challenges and objections people had in their minds and what it would take to actually create an offer that's compelling enough that it tips the scales in the balance of a yes rather than a no. So I created a whole tug of war game on stage. And the tables were going against each other. So one person got up with their offer and would give a compelling, irresistible reason to buy now, which would be whether it's a bonus, whether it's a guarantee, something that creates a little bit of fear of missing out. And on the other side, the other team would give an objection to the offer.
Right.
And if the audience would raise their flag, if they actually felt that the reason to buy now was compelling, they would raise, green flags. If it was just they would raise yellow flags. And if it was, not compelling at all, they would raise orange flags.
Yeah.
So if the person got a majority green flags, we would move the tug of war rope on their side. Now, the other people with the objections, if the room thought the objection was legitimate, they would do the flags as well and then move the rope on their side. So the goal was to win, to have your offer outweigh all the objections and concerns that people have to buying. And so the whole room got this physical understanding of how compelling you really have to be in marketing to inspire people to say yes. So that's a way I created a peak emotional experience. So whenever I'm teaching something that's really challenging or really difficult to grasp intellectually, I wrap an experience around it. So people can understand, okay, I get it now, not just because you've explained it to me, but because I've had this experience of the thing that you're talking about.
Right. I love that. And I could see doing that even in the online programs where you even just have that point where you say, hey, stop here, take what you've learned, go and apply it in some physical way of actually achieving like doing one of those steps along the way. Do you do much, obviously in that live setting, you've got a whole bunch of people there. We can pull on the rope, we can raise flags. Do you do much in the way of either, coaching or accountability or groups or creating something interaction amongst students as they're going through the program?
Yeah. Well, core experience number 7 is feedback loops, and core experience 8 is community. So, we tend to do both online training, but also live group coaching. So, for example, in our Experience Product Masterclass, we have 90-minute group coaching calls on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but they're different kinds of calls. So Mondays, they get access to me. On Wednesdays, they're in smaller coaching communities with 50 students to a coach. Yep. So basically, they get to know in smaller communities their coach and get more personalized feedback. And then on Friday, we have an implementation expert there who helps them with the technology and the technical implementation. So There are all these different ways that people can engage with us and with each other. And we have a huge Facebook group component as well, where they're really getting to know each other. And we post things into the Facebook group on a regular basis. For example, every Friday we drop leaderboards and we let people know who's at the top of the program in terms of receiving what we call experience points, which means they've been taking actions and not just watching the trainings, but completing the actions associated with those trainings. But we also have 2 tracks. So we have a core track, which is the essential curriculum, and we have an overachiever track. So we don't want the people who just want to do the bare minimum to feel like they're comparing themselves against the people who want to do absolutely everything possible. So we separate out the tracks because you don't want to create a system it actually unintentionally disincentivizes some people from doing the work. You want people to compare themselves to people who are at a similar level than them and not to people that are so far above them. So those are some of the things that we do, but that gives a lot of accountability because every single week they know that we're going to be posting these. But the really cool thing is because we understand where each person is in the program, we can run contests. So if people are starting to drop behind, say, the third week of the program, we run what's called a jump contest. And we say if anybody, whoever jumps 20 points between now and Monday, we're going to send you a t-shirt, for example. And if you already are at max points, no worries, you still get the t-shirt. And so we sent hundreds of t-shirts around the world because of this. And people actually feel so proud to wear these t-shirts that they take pictures of themselves and they post it on the Facebook group because they earned this thing. And the fact that we're incentivizing people to catch up from behind rather than just being like, oh, you're behind, forget about it. And we also run this internal, what we call Operation Unengaged Student Rescue Campaign. So we physically reach out via text message, Facebook Messenger, email to people who maybe have not logged in yet or are falling behind. So we actually go and reach out to them. And it's super interesting because one of our students, Jennifer Holbus, had completely fallen behind in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the program. And she said historically, she would have just disappeared.
Given up. Yeah.
Walked away and given up because that's what most people do in those situations. But we actually called her and that inspired her to get back into the program, not for herself, but because we cared to do it for us. She ended up making $150,000 in the 10 weeks of the program, and shortly thereafter, another $100,000. So she did $250,000, and she was going to give up just because we reached out to her. Know?
What was she teaching, or what was she creating? Just
she teaches a project management system, So a very specific form of project management system that she was teaching to, project managers all over the world, basically.
Awesome.
And then she was getting large corporate clients to support them in developing this system.
I love the experience points concept just from my own high school days of playing role-playing games. But so I'm curious, and this, I don't think it falls into your model from what I've seen, but I am curious as to your thoughts on it, because we do occasionally have customers asking for, or our clients asking for this, which is the concept of sort of control over progress. So the way it usually manifests is, I don't want someone to access lesson 10 until they've finished lessons 1 through 9, things like that. Like, you can't do this until you've done these things. Do you build that in, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah. So we have a very set curriculum schedule where we drop the curriculum twice a week.
Okay.
So basically on Mondays and on Thursdays at 11:59 p.m. Pacific.
Okay,
and
so it's a time-based schedule that you're releasing content. So they really can't
schedule. The reason we're doing that in this particular program, it's different in other programs, is because we have the whole group going together, right? And also what happens is when we drop a new training, they see a point gap. So they see, okay, you have 59 points and there's actually 80 points available now. So they're seeing the gap in terms of where they are. Now, of course, they have lifelong access to the entire program, so they can go back to it. But the reason why is we really want to keep the group going through together. We do have other programs where it's a little bit different, where I think that actually can make a lot of sense. If it's an evergreen program where people aren't going through together and it's completely self-paced, then I think that does make sense.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've always struggled with the blocking it. To me, it feels a bit like I like your way of doing it. That sort of time-based, hey, we've just dropped, you're all part of a cohort. It keeps everybody on the same track. Otherwise, you have some people race ahead, others fall behind, and it becomes harder to sort of motivate everyone to move together as a community, as you were saying. When you have that sort of evergreen where anyone can access it anytime, I struggle with the idea of, it sort of feels to me like I'm selling you a textbook and saying, you can't read chapter 10 until you've read the first 9. And some people like to skip ahead out of interest, and maybe that's what but there is a time and a place for it. I understand. It's sort of one of those, I find, things where there's really good arguments both ways, and it kind of depends on the circumstances. But I like the way you're doing it with that time-based drip scheduling, essentially, which is great.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting because people are going to choose their own adventure. Yeah. And I find that there's a fine balance when in other programs and technologies and softwares that we've built, when we try to say this is exactly what to do, people kind of repel against that a little bit. Like, they want to feel like they have a choice in the matter. And that's kind of part of teaching and educating adults, is allowing them to feel like they're in control of their own learning journey and it's not being spoon-fed to them. So I see both sides, but this way, we're treating them like adults. This is kind of what is supposed to do by now, but we're going to keep releasing these. If you fall behind, you're choosing to fall behind, but we're giving you all these opportunities to catch up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious is there anything you do? So obviously there's videos in your courses, right?
Yep, lots of them.
And I know, and then you mentioned that you kind of have these assignments that people have to go out and complete an action and they're going to get points for that. Beyond that, do you incorporate any kind of quizzing, surveying or other things within it? Or is it really those key things? And there's, I'm just actually curious how you're doing it. Is there, what are the sort of most important or most effective maybe content pieces within the course that you're using?
So we do some surveys. We don't do so much quizzing because it's not for us about retention. It's more about them completing actions because it's not about being a student. Our program is about them finishing a product, launching a product, and making $2,000 or more. So what we actually do is we create milestone documents. So all of the core milestones in the program get listed on the milestone document. And so they keep the milestone document and there are dates for each milestone for them to submit. And then their coaches review the milestone documents and give them feedback on what they've completed. Because our program's a lot more customized. If it's just them completing a quiz to say, yes, I understand there are 10 core experiences and the experience formula. I mean, I don't care if they know that there are 10 experiences, right? I care that they actually have a mission statement that's so powerful that people are going to want to buy their product. So I'm not quizzing them on retention of the material or memorization or anything like that. What we're doing is, have you created elements that are going to make your product marketable, that are going to make people want to buy it, that are going to actually build your business? Have you created marketing elements that are going to help you sell this thing? Like that's really what we're measuring. And we're not measuring, how accurate their recollection of our teachings are, because that would be more about me and less about them. And I care about their results. I don't care about them being perfect students. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. That's why I asked, because it's really interesting to see how people approach that differently. And you're right, when the quizzing is really about making sure there's that knowledge retention. But if you're actually sending them out to take action in the world, achieve a result, then you don't necessarily need that. Because we really push, I include a lot of quizzes in my courses, but mine are usually much more about knowledge retention. I mean, my personal one even is in the LSAT. So you're preparing for an exam. You need to have certain knowledge retention. You also need to go and apply it. But with yours, where it's really like, who cares if you remember all 9? Just go, make sure you're actually building the product and including those things in it. You mentioned that you have coaches, though. That's interesting. So how do you manage the coaching side? And I'm curious on the cost perspective of that too. And for like some of the people watching who are either earlier in the game or just getting going and they're thinking, wow, how would I include coaching? Is that something, you started out doing yourself? How have you been able to scale with that? And do you find the coaching is a pretty awesome thing to add in there to help people through the program?
Yeah. So we have about 20 coaches on the Live Your Message team that work across not just one product, but about 5 different programs that we include group coaching in. And it's definitely not something that I started with. At first, I was the sole coach doing all the coaching for all the programs. Now there are programs that I don't even coach anymore, but I created the curriculum and I created the videos for them. And that's really powerful for me because then I can kind of focus my coaching in the places where it's going to be most valuable. And I believe in creating programs that are really context for implementation and application. And most people, if they're taking this program, they're not confident in the area or the topic that we're teaching, right? If they could have gotten the results themselves, they would have gotten it by now. And it's not always for lack of information. Because like I said, you can search Google and get all the information that you need. So even though we create some of the best frameworks and trainings, it's really that application where the rubber meets the road. And for some people, this breaks down. So not having a way to ask for support or get a second opinion is, I think, what throws a lot of people off, because they could have two people could have access to the same information and understand and implement it completely differently. One person could get huge success and one person could fall on their face. Yeah. And that's just the truth of it. So the coaching really allows everyone to have that second opinion. So they might think they have a mission statement that's brilliant and we're like, we don't get it, So being able to say, we don't get it. And I don't think it's actually as clear or as compelling as you think it is powerful, because that's really what's going to get someone the result, and not just the fact that the training is incredible and the training is gamified. It's actually being able to ask a real human being, am I on the right track?
And I mean, I personally, when I've done the coaching, so I started out doing tutoring offline and teaching offline. When I created the online course, I did include a lot of personal interaction. And for me, not only about getting results, but even just, especially in the early days, that one-on-one feedback of like, I'm helping you out, or even one-to-group feedback of seeing what people were struggling with helped me constantly improve and adjust my courses and my program. So I'm curious for you though, if someone's watching this and they're either, just getting started or trying to figure out, hey, coaching, this is an interesting thing. Where would you suggest, at what point do you suggest adding that in? Is that something you would do right out of the gate, where if it's just an individual course creator and just say, just do it yourself until you hit scale? And then is there a break point where you see usually or would recommend adding in coaching, either in terms of like a minimum price point to be able to afford it, or a certain amount of revenue before you're like, you know what, I can afford to go and have someone take over this coaching? Or how do you usually look at that transition? I mean, me personally, I just basically got to the point where I couldn't do it myself. And then I'm like, okay, I need some help from tutors to help my students.
Well, there's degrees of access, and obviously people pay for more access. So one access is just Q&A call. Basically you do a training and then there's Q&A afterwards. The next level is actually real group coaching. The next level is actually private coaching and private feedback, email access, something like that. So what I recommend for everyone is what I call an earn while you learn approach to product creation. I don't actually recommend that you create a whole product and you record the entire thing and then you sell it and you let people go through it on autopilot. Because as a product creator, you don't get any feedback. You've created the product that you think people need to have, and not necessarily the product that people actually need to get to a result. So I recommend that everyone actually deliver the product live first. By live, I don't mean live in person, but live virtual, through a series of webinars like we're here on Zoom right now talking to each other, and delivering the program and actually seeing how are people responding in the chat. What questions are they answering? So for example, our Experience Product Master class, this is going to be the third year that we deliver the program. The first year I delivered every single training live with an audience. I was reading the chat as I was delivering it. And then at the end, I would answer everybody's questions.
Right.
So then we would post the replays. Now for the second year, I adjusted all my scripts, I kind of rearranged stuff, and I pre-recorded the entire program. And then I just showed up for the group coaching calls. But I had a much better sense of where people were getting stuck, not just from delivering them live and seeing the chat, but watching the Facebook group, seeing the results at the end and the feedback at the end. But if I had tried to pre-record the whole thing first, it's first of all more time consuming to pre-record everything than to just show up live and deliver it. I would have had to record it all anyway. And it would have been a much bigger project. Now this third year that I'm delivering it, I'm making some small modifications and changes, based on the experience people have had, but I don't have to re-record the whole program. And now again, I'm showing up for the group coaching calls on Mondays, and we have the coaches on Wednesdays, and we have another master coach who's an implementation expert on Fridays. So to answer your other questions, in addition to doing an earn while you learn approach and delivering live, whether or not you include group coaching or just Q&A, that's my primary recommendation when you're first starting. But in terms of a break point, at which point group coaching is viable, I would say at the $497 plus price point, group coaching is viable. Now, in terms of when people get private access to you, it's usually at $997 plus or above, depending on your level of expertise. Now, the only students that get private access to me are in my $32,000 a year program. Other people get group access. So it kind of, as you progress and your time and expertise becomes more and more valuable, then you may have other people coaching for you. You may be giving access in a group coaching format, but people aren't getting your one-on-one attention.
No, I love that. And I like that progression. And that's kind of how, when I was doing it, I started out, I think I was tutoring at 50 or $100 an hour for the one-on-one, and then went up and up. And eventually I got to the point, especially in now I'm all I do is Thinkific, where even $1,000 an hour and you can't get my one-on-one time. However, I now have transitioned where I just give it away for free, but it's only in very, select circumstances where I can do that. Right. But I have seen a lot of people do that, where they start out at even, free for the one-on-one. It's included to anyone in the program, because maybe you only have 10 people in the program initially. And then you get to the point where you charge for it. And then really you can just start increasing that price point and adding in levels below with coaches as demand indicates. Because anytime I run into someone saying, I've got this problem, I've got all these coaching clients or all these clients who want my time, but I don't have enough time, I'm like, raise your rates. It's usually the easiest thing to do. And then you can always slot in other people that you can coach to be coaches or help with it on the lower end there.
And most of our coaches went through our programs. And so we're watching out for talent. So people who really do the work, get huge results, love the work, love the company, love me, they become our best coaches because they understand what it's like to be a student in the program.
Yeah, that's great. And for everyone watching, I mentioned a couple times, but if you want to learn more about Marisa's program or get into building your own experience products, experienceproducts.com/Thinkific, and check that out, and you can learn a little bit more. Marisa, anything else you want to add around building experience products or gamification, student success, anything in courses or education topic?
Well, what I would say is that just so you understand, this experience formula, these 10 core principles are something that you can apply to both marketing and delivery. And when it comes to delivery, they can actually be applied to one-on-one coaching, consulting, or service-based businesses. They can also be applied to home study courses, trainings, and programs. They can also be applied to larger group programs and masterminds as well. So you can apply this set of principles in a lot of different contexts. And we've had people in dozens of industries apply this and get results. So essentially what an experience product is it's a product that combines the principles of gamification, adult learning theory, just really good curriculum design, and these 10 principles that we've been talking about, the 10 critical experiences, to create a product that really inspires people into action, that closes the gap between what they have to do and what they want to do. So it gets them kind of hooked on taking action, getting results. And then when they do, they're ultimately going to want to buy from you over and over again.
Excellent. Thank you. So for everyone, if you want to learn more about those 10 principles and start incorporating that into your products or services, again, check out experienceproducts.com/Thinkific. Marisa, thank you. It was awesome. Really appreciate it. And thanks again.
Sure thing. I always like to say, now go out there and live your message. Make it happen.